Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Lords of the Salt Road reveals the dramatic history of the Norse earls of Orkney who owed their allegiance to the Kings of Norway. Now, as you may or may not be aware by now, I consider myself something of that worst sort of creature, an armchair historian, but this next one has me stumped. So I'm delighted to say I'm joined live on the line by Angus Constam, who's going to tell us more of the Lords of the Salt Road themselves. Angus, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Good to have you. Where are you? Somewhere on the... And where is the Salt Road, by the way?
It's a name that was initially thought up by the novelist Eric Linklater, and it referred to the Viking path from Norway across the North Sea to Orkney, Shetland, and then to the rest of the British Isles. So essentially the Salt Road is the North Sea, or as the Vikings used to call it, the West Sea.
Well, of course they would. It depends on when you're sitting. Of course they. I had never thought of that before. But my flabber is officially gasted. What's your background, Angus? Why are you so eminently qualified to write this book?
I wouldn't say eminently qualified to write anything, but I've written a lot of books in my time. And I was a little out of my depth with this one. I'm mainly a maritime historian. I'm also a kind of expert on piracy, international piracy. However, I was brought up in Orkney,
right,
and I was schooled in this stuff from an early age. You know, when we went to school, we were taught that there was an earldom here that ruled half of Britain, and Viking raids were launched from here around the British Isles and Ireland and the mainland of Europe. So it was kind of strange background. But a publisher approached me and he said, look, we're looking for a new angle on a book about the Vikings. Have you got one? And I said, I'd written a couple of simple books about pirates, including a Haynes manual of the Viking warrior.
No. How to fix your longboat?
I don't know how to do a spark plug change on a Viking warrior, but so I don't know if you know the Haynes manuals. They're a sort of British thing designed to do cars.
Yeah.
I have one for my geriatric Ford that it could have been written in Swahili for all I know, but. So I've done a couple of things, and the publisher asked me, and I said, oh, do I have a story for you? Because one of the things we're brought up with up here, I retired back to Orkney a few years. I've been all around the world and worked in America and Britain and whatever. And there was a thing called the Orkney Angus saga, which is a Norse history of the Earls of Orkney. And it's kind of known here, and it's known by scholars, I suppose, medieval scholars, but not otherwise. So this was kind of drawing on it and then tying it in with what was going on in the rest of the world. And it really struck me that what my old history teacher had said was true. Orkney was a kind of epicenter for the whole Viking expansion into the British Isles.
Because here's the thing, you've just sort of like got my old grey matter thinking here, because you just said about the West Sea, because we think about it, us mainland Brits, and they've got mums from Glasgow, but we're thinking about the North Sea, but the Vikings thinking of the West Sea, and with the greatest respect, Angus, a lot of people will get the Orkneys confused with the Shetlands, confused with all those little bits and pieces here, there, and everywhere. Don't even mention the Faroes, but we tend to think of those bits, and then there's nothing apart from you get Iceland and then Greenland, and then it's all polar bears and whatever. But if you look at it from a Viking perspective, because my other current thing is the fact that we look at the Mediterranean the wrong way around as well. We seem to think it's looking south. The Mediterranean sort of ends at Gibraltar, when in fact that whole Carthage, Tunisia, Alexandria, we're looking at the wrong way around. And we are very guilty of doing the same thing with your sphere of influence, as it were, because Orkney, Shetland, these are the main sort of, if you like, this is the hub. This is the turn left, turn right bit.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, in the days before airplanes and trucks and motorways, you had to move things by sea.
Yeah.
Right? So to go by boat from Stavanger or Bergen to Orkney was much easier than to sail a cargo ship from London to up here or anywhere, really. So you've got to view things as a sea as the sea connects things rather than separates. And that was very much the thing for the Salt Road. It linked one part of Europe to another.
I thought that, you mentioned that you're an expert on piracy. I have to go at this point, but also we're looking at the Vikings because, again, we are taught that Vikings are these fearsome raiders who come over and scare the living bejesus out of the Lindisfarne, etc., etc. But you cannot merely subsist on raiding, because after a while you run out of things to raid, basically. I mean, Eric the Red notwithstanding. And again, it's something that I've only got into the past 2 or 3 years, but we always look at the Vikings going west. But in fact, the Vikings go east, all the way down the Danube, etc., Black Sea, down to Constantinople. So we're looking at the Vikings all wrong as thinking of these hairy-chested Kirk Douglas lookalikes, aren't we?
That's right. They not only raided, and the raiding was the first wave, but they also had civil wars in Norway and in Scandinavia, and a lot of rebels went out there. And what is meant to have started the earldom was the first guy who kind of united Norway as a king, Harald Finehair, in the late 9th century, kind of chased the rebels, had an expedition out into Orkney, Shetland, and then what we call now the Western Isles of Scotland, which they call the South Isles, the Sudreys, just to turn your world on the head upside down again. So, and then they kept expanding. They had a border just north of where Inverness is now, but the earldom included a lot of the coast all the way down to the Isle of Man. And that's 500 miles from the top of Shetland down to the Isle of Man, right on the gateway into the Irish Sea. And a lot of the earls were punching above their weight. One of them was killed at Clontarf in 1014, fighting for a Norse claimant to the Irish kingdom there. So yeah, they were all over the place.
I mean, 1014 is, I have always been taught that, the height of whatever is Hardrada being killed at Stamford Bridge in 1066, the other major battle, and that, if you like, is the twilight of the Norse gods, if you will. So what period are we talking? Are we talking the much again, another bit of bad labelling, what is referred to by idiots as the Dark Ages, but are in fact a time of absolutely brilliance, brilliant discovery, etc., etc. So what time period are we looking here, Angus?
Well, the earldom was started in the late 9th century. So right. After the first Viking raids happened, and then they expanded south, and they went on until the Middle Ages, right into the Middle Ages. So, but the last Norse ones, they died off in the early 13th century.
Okay.
And it was probably the Norwegian king Haakon who came over and fought the Scots at the Battle of Largs in 1270, whatever. Yeah. And he landed up dying back in Orkney. He was kind of brokenhearted, and he could have gone back and done it again, but that was the end of it. But like you said, 1066, end of the Viking world. That's what the school textbooks say.
Yeah.
But a century later, there was a guy called Svein Asleifsson, based in Orkney, who used to do he was a farmer. And then he'd sow his crops. He'd go off on a spring raid,
yeah,
and come back, bring in his harvest, go on an autumn raid, then come back, and he and his men would drink in their big hall until the next spring. So it was a kind of seasonal thing. And he was killed in Dublin again, on a raid in Dublin in 1255. So,
wow.
1155. So that's a century after the Battle of Hastings and Stamford Bridge and Harold Hardrada and all that.
Yeah,
so
not only that, but also William the Conqueror is supposed to have subdued Ireland and everything else, but it obviously hasn't, because you've got the chieftains of Ireland are still having a dog in this game.
That's it. They and the Norse were doing exactly the same thing. They were running a lot of the parts of Britain, and they were fighting with the kings of Scots, with English kings. They had claims against. They were fighting for claimants, Norse claimants, for places like Jorvik and now York, and so they were punching above their weight, but they're also getting themselves punched back a lot. Quite a few of them were killed, and you were speaking about Harold Hardrada. When he got himself killed at Samford Bridge outside York, 2 of the Orkney earls were with him, but they stayed back with the boats in Rickall, a few miles away from the battle, so they survived, and they were kind of ignominiously allowed to go home by the Anglo-Saxons.
So when we say Earls of Orkney, are these self-appointed titles, or are these have they been granted by one of the sort of the Norwegian leaders?
Yeah, initially it was formed by the Norwegian king, and they owed their allegiance to the Norwegian kings, but largely they were kind of left to their own devices until they stepped out of line.
Right.
Then they were sort of recalled to Norway, given a bit of a row or worse. Sometimes they were imprisoned and never to be seen again. And but it kind of ticked over for a long time, and they had marvelous names. One of the early ones was Thorfinn Skullsplitter, Earl Thorfinn.
Well known for his Thumble collection or something like that. Like knitting, that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah,
the guy killed at Clontarf in 1014 was Sigurd the Stout, and he'd famously had that magic raven banner with a sort of that you often see with Viking reenactors or anything like Vikings in the TV show, but Odin's raven banner. And then you had Einar Crooked Mouth, Thorfinn the Mighty, and so it goes on. And then the later ones became saints. You had St. Magnus, who got himself sainted after being beheaded by his nephew, by his cousin.
Right.
And then you had St. Ronald as well, who founded the magnificent cathedral up in Orkney, the sort of Norse 12th century cathedral. So they were still kicking around in the early Middle Ages.
Awful lot of beheading, awful lot of infighting makes Game of Thrones look like an episode of Jack and Ori, basically. Is it kind of like that?
That was a reviewer for the book kind of said it sounds like scheming, sorcery, heroism. It's sort of like several seasons of Game of Thrones written all joined in together. So I kind of like that one.
When we talk about when we talk about earls,
things like poetry and Norse poetry, and some of them thought themselves as poets as much as earls.
Now you see this thing because we've got sagas, haven't we? Presumably, when you're trying to find out about this. It is the sagas that keep this stuff alive and help you. Because I mean, how do you get this? I know you're familiar with the terrain, but obviously, which helps walking the ground and all that. But you can't obviously unless you dig up Skull Splitter and ask him. I mean, how do you get the sources? Are they actually kept in saga? Or is that the way they're kept down?
Well, Thorfinn Skullsplitter is actually meant to be buried in a little mound about a mile across the bay from me. So,
okay.
But I don't think that's true. I think it's just a Neolithic mound, one of the many here. You can't dig a hole in Orkney without coming across some ruins of stones or something. But he was, but yeah, you get the Norse sagas. But the trouble is, a lot of them aren't linked to dates, and they can't be verified. So half the thing was going to Irish sources, and other things to Irish, Anglo-Saxon sagas, Scottish annals, and Scandinavian ones, to link it all in together, to give it a grounding. So it's not just a saga. Sometimes they're made up, sometimes they're not, but it's grounding it in as much fact as you can, but making it a fun read. Then you couldn't get the Game of Thrones kind of thing going if it wasn't.
When we think about earls, I mean, we tend to think about that sort of, I don't know, we're talking later medieval period, and you think of, people in capes and they've got castles. I mean, not a lot of need for castles or cavalry, I suppose, in the Orkney. So, well, I mean, are we talking long hauls here? I mean, how are we talking? I mean, is it again? You mentioned it's too bleeding cold and wet and miserable in winter to do anything. You plant. I like the idea. You plant your seeds and then you think, right, I've got another 3 months. I'll go off on a quick raid, and then we'll just drink mead until it's time to get and do some more raid until the crops need to get gathering. So, what are we looking up in terms of a society set up and if you're like a village / earldom set up?
Yeah, well, that's kind of it. You go off and do these things. They go off raiding. It's compared to Norway, and you come from a little fjord somewhere. You come over here, you settle in Orkney or Shetland, and also Caithness, further down in the Scottish mainland. The land in Orkney is is known for its agriculture now,
right?
And it was then. It was very good soil, and to come across a place like this after coming from a little Norwegian fjord where there's nothing but the mountain behind you, was quite a revelation. So it was like easy farming. Throw something in the ground and it'll spring up. So so that was a good base for finance and raiding and taxation. So the earls kind of were, in fact, they're not even earls, they're jarls.
Jarls.
Norse jarls.
Jarls, okay.
Indeed. Jarls. But earls is the easier translation of it. So
I like jarl. I like jarl. I think, you
know. But they didn't really have a castle, but they had big fortified kind of houses. So
right.
Yeah.
And so are they sending any of this back in tribute to Norway? Because obviously Norway, beautiful country, looks very imposing. But like you said, it's sea and mountain, not an awful lot of arable land.
That's it. Yeah, they have to pay a bit of tax to the Norwegian kings, a bit of tithes, but essentially they try to be as self-dependent as they can and not give anything unless they're really asked. So it was kind of like almost a piratical earldom, but because it controlled such a large swathe of the north of Britain, it was actually quite a powerful one. And it was only, one of the weird things is, you like your strange history facts, Orkney was still owned by Norway until the 15th century.
Wow, that late.
So Orkney and Shetland have been Norwegian longer than they've been part of Scotland, and they've been part of Britain even less than that. So the Norwegians are
what? So when did they overstep the line? When did they get too big for their, I imagine, fur-lined boots at this point?
Well, a couple of times they rebelled against the king. That wasn't good. Or they, or other rivals they had a civil war in Norway, and people came over and stole basically stole the land and kind of try to hold it for a few years. But mainly rebellion. Rebellion wasn't encouraged by the Norwegian kings. So there you go.
So when it comes to putting this all down, I mean, presumably this kind of must almost write itself, and you just sort of strap yourself in and get ready for, I don't know, appearances by Two Beards and Stone Splitters. And does the Boneless one appear? What's his name? The Boneless, who's everybody's favourite?
Ivor the Boneless. He does make a brief appearance.
Fabulous.
And so does Macbeth, the real Macbeth.
Well, you can't say that name on live radio. I'll have to turn around 3 times and spit now. But there you go. Yeah. How does the Scottish play make an appearance then on this one, Angus?
Well, he was a ruler in the north part of Scotland, in Moray, and they went into clashes with the marvellously named Earl Thorfinn the Mighty, and I'm glad to say that the local guy kind of won, and Macbeth got a bit of a kicking in that one. So.
Did anybody dress up as trees at that point? Is that later on?
Yeah, I think that was a Shakespearean add-on to the story.
Okay, fair enough. What are you hoping that people are going to learn? I mean, everything, I suppose. And when does it sort of peter out? When do the earls finally overstep the line and get direct rule from Norway?
They kind of, Shetland is taken over after a rebellion in the early 13th century.
Yeah.
And is directly ruled by Norway. But the thing with the earldom, it kind of peters out because by the 13th century, they've run out of Norsemen to run it. It's kind of, they've intermarried with Scottish aristocracy.
Right.
And they get their earls are ones from the Highlands or from the northeast of Scotland and so on. So it's kind of, the blood is diluted a bit. But even then, they were still backing Norway when it came to Norway invading Scotland and reclaiming the Western Isles in the later 13th century. So after that, they have a period the history books call the Shadow Earls, where nobody knows much about them and nobody cares. And then it's a slide into sort of Scottish earldom.
Going to ask you this question, Angus. Okay, if you because we've had Ivan the Boneless and whatever Skull Splitter. If you had if you had a Norse name, would it be Angus the? I don't know. What would your preferred name be? Angus the Axe Wheeler. What would it be?
I quite like the guy called Sigurd the Stout. I think that would be kind of suit me a bit. I'm a little on the plump side, so
I don't know if they have
German friends staying with me just now, and they've pointed out that every time they see me, I'm a few pounds heavier than last time.
Well, I think the Stout or the Scribe, perhaps Angus the Scribe. I would of course be Giles the Gibberer, but there you go. The book, the book. It's a absolutely. You see, people say to me, "Why do you like history so much? It's all about dead kings." It's not. It's absolutely like this. I mean, did you now wander around Orkney going, I get that bit now? I mean, I know you knew a lot of it before, but has it, is that the wonderful thing about doing history, especially when you are local to what you're actually writing about?
It's rare that I am local to what I write about. Apart from, I live overlooking Scapa Flow, and I've written a lot of stuff about, the maritime history and stuff about the Second World War and like you said, pirates. But it's kind of nice when it's set somewhere that and you can actually visit the places. So, and the book is illustrated with, it's almost like the photos in it by a friend of mine, Charles Tate, are almost like, it could almost be done by a tourist brochure because it shows how pretty it is. Obviously, they don't show Orkney in a bleak winter gale when it takes on a different hue, but that's all the more fun because that's when you hunker down with the fire on, and I live in an old farmhouse. We have a nice fire, and there's a bottle of whiskey in front of the fire. It's quite pleasant.
There are worse,
even on a bad day. Even the dogs don't want to go out.
The book is called Lords of the Salt Road. Now, if you go to a TRE bookstore, you'll see this magnificent. Is that on the symbol? It looks like two horses looking back on each other. Is that, or am I looking at something much more meaningful than that? Actually,
it was a whalebone plaque found in a Norse excavation up here, and it's often used for things. I was in a pub last week in Kirkwall, the main town in Orkney, and they have that in the windows. But it's a whalebone sort of washing board or something. I'd like to think they actually meant it was the symbol of the earls of Orkney or something. But it's just a really nice, very pretty, very evocative artifact.
And it kept the socks clean as well. The book, anyway, go to our bookstore, click on that. I implore you to, and it'll be winging its way too. Angus, do you do social media? Do you do any sort of? Can we find you online?
You can do, yes. I'm reluctantly dragged into the world of social media and radio and television and things, ever have to. But I'm an old fuddy-duddy, and I kind of prefer quill pens and archives to that kind of thing.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
I'm on Facebook and all that kind of nonsense. So, and I have you look me up and you'll find me on something.
You say that almost grudgingly, Angus, but listen, it's been brilliant to speak to you on this Monday morning. It's something I knew nothing about, and I'm now going to go and research even further because you've awakened the arm. You've created a monster, Angus. The book is called Lords of the Salt Road, The Norse Earls of Orkney and the Viking World. It's by the brilliant publishers Osprey. Oh, I like Osprey. It's by the even more brilliant Constam. Angus, thank you so much for your time today.
That's an absolute pleasure. Good speaking to you.